Imagine a mansion ruled by wild, unstoppable twins, so out of control that every nanny quit in less than a day. But then came one woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. What she did next didn't just change their lives. It changed her own. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. The Wyndham estate stood like a castle in the heart of Boston, its tall gates and marble steps giving off the kind of grandness that made people whisper. But inside, it was far from peaceful. Every morning felt like a hurricane had passed through. Toys were scattered across polished floors, milk stains marked the silk curtains, and a trail of cereal led from the kitchen to the stairs. The cause of all this mayhem? Two 7-year-old twins, Lena and Leo Wyndham. Noah Wyndham, their father, had once been known as a focused, sharp real estate mogul, but ever since his wife had passed away 3 years ago, his once organized life had crumbled under the weight of single parenthood. His days began before the sun came up, usually with a crash or a shout echoing through the halls. Most mornings, he was found in the kitchen trying to flip pancakes with one hand while stopping a pillow fight with the other. His suits were always wrinkled, his coffee always cold. The twins, clever and energetic, treated the mansion like their personal adventure park. Dozens of nannies had come and gone. Some left within hours. Others made it a day or two before giving up completely. It wasn't that Lena and Leo were evil. They were just loud, wild, and completely out of control. They refused to follow rules, challenged every instruction, and had a secret code only they understood. Noah loved them deeply, but even he had begun to wonder if peace would ever return to his home. On one of those chaotic mornings, Noah was crouched under the kitchen table, trying to fish out a missing shoe with a spaghetti spoon, when his housekeeper, Mrs. Douglas, walked in with a phone in her hand. "There's someone on the line asking about the nanny position," she said, not hiding her doubt. "She sounds different." Noah peeked out from under the table, his tie already stained with ketchup. Different how? She didn't ask about salary. She asked if the children liked bedtime stories. For a moment, Noah just stared at her. That was indeed different. Callie Burns wasn't your average nanny. In fact, she'd never been one at all. A few years ago, she had been a rising marketing manager at a small tech firm, full of big ideas and dreams of starting her own company. But things had changed. She had married young, too fast, to a man who slowly chipped away at her confidence with every cruel word. When she lost her job and her partner walked out, she found herself with nothing but a bag of clothes and a bruised spirit. She had been staying with a kind but distant neighbor, sleeping on an old couch and scrolling through job listings that never led anywhere. Then one day she saw a message on a local community board. Single father seeks help with young twins. Must be patient, must be brave, must not run away at the first pancake to the face. Callie had smiled for the first time in weeks. Now, as she stepped out of a cab and stared up at the Wyndham mansion, her heart thudded in her chest. She wore a plain gray coat and carried a small backpack. Her shoes were second-hand, and her hands trembled slightly from nerves, but in her eyes was something stronger than fear, something like quiet determination. Mrs. Douglas greeted her at the door with a raised eyebrow and a disapproving glance at her worn coat. But Callie only smiled and followed her inside. The key. House smelled like lavender and burnt toast. Somewhere upstairs, a loud crash was followed by laughter and the sound of little feet running. Noah walked in moments later, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was untucked, his tie draped around his neck like a forgotten scarf. When he saw Callie, he looked surprised, but also, somehow, hopeful. "I'm Noah," he said simply, offering a tired smile. "I'm Callie," she replied. "I heard you needed help." Before he could say anything more, the twins burst into the room. Lena wore a tiara and mismatched socks, holding a toy sword like a royal guard. Leo followed, covered in glitter and proudly dragging a string of paper airplanes behind him. They both stopped short when they saw Callie. "Another nanny?" Lena asked, squinting. "She won't last an hour," Leo declared. Callie knelt slowly to their level, her smile calm and easy. "I'm not here to be in charge," she said gently. I'm here to learn how to be your friend. That's harder than it sounds. The twins looked at each other, confused. No one had ever said that before. The rest of the day went by in a blur of small tests and quiet moments. Lena threw a paintbrush across the room during arts and crafts. Callie caught it without blinking. Leo tried to scare her with a rubber snake at dinner. She named it Sir Wiggles and pretended to feed it salad. By the time the sun set, Callie was still there, sitting between the twins on the couch, reading a story about a brave bird who learned to fly again after falling. And for the first time in a long while, the Wyndham home was quiet, not empty, just peaceful. The following morning, Callie stood quietly in the Wyndham kitchen, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The sunlight filtered through the wide windows, painting golden stripes across the floor. For a brief moment, everything felt still, almost peaceful. But that calm didn't last long. A loud crash came from upstairs, followed by giggles and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the hallway. Callie took a deep breath, placed her tea down, and headed toward the storm. Lena and Leo were already at it again. They had flipped the cushions off the living room sofa and built a pirate ship in the center of the room. Pillows were scattered. Like debris, and a jar of peanut butter stood proudly on the floor, half empty with a spoon sticking out like a flag. "We're sailing to Cookie Island," Leo shouted, standing on the top of the couch with a paper hat. Lena, sword in hand, added, "And you're not allowed unless you bring chocolate." Callie didn't yell. She didn't even raise an eyebrow. Instead, she walked over to the ship, crouched down beside them, and said, "Well, I brought imagination. Will that do?" The twins looked at her, puzzled for a second, and then burst out laughing. "Okay, you can come," Lena said, offering her a seat made of cushions. That was how Callie earned her first tiny spot in their imaginary world. Over. The next few days, Callie became a quiet force in the house. She didn't come in with strict rules or loud commands. Instead, she listened. She noticed. She adjusted. When Leo refused to eat lunch, Callie didn't scold him. She simply asked, "What would make this meal fun?" The next day, sandwiches were cut into animal shapes, and Leo ate too without complaint. When Lena refused to sleep, insisting that monsters were hiding under her bed, Callie made her a small flashlight necklace and called it her monster finder. That night, Lena finally slept peacefully. Mrs. Douglas, the house manager, watched everything with skeptical eyes. She had seen more nannies than birthdays at the estate. None of them had lasted long. But Callie was different. She never tried to impress anyone. She just did what needed to be done, gently and steadily. She even helped Darla, the cook, prepare dinner when the kitchen was short-staffed. Darla, who rarely smiled at new people, found herself laughing at Callie's quiet jokes and stories about her old apartment with creaky floors and nosy neighbors. Noah, too, began to notice the change. The house, once filled with shouting and slammed doors, now echoed with laughter and the sound of feet running in happy excitement, not frustration. He often stood outside the playroom door listening to Callie read stories or sing little songs while folding laundry. Her voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room like a soft melody. One evening, as he passed the hallway, he heard Lena say, "I like Miss Callie. She doesn't leave." And Leo added, "Yeah, she listens even when we're annoying." But outside the mansion, Callie's world was far from calm. She still slept on a small couch in her friend Owen's cramped apartment, keeping her belongings in a single backpack she never unpacked. Every evening after the twins were asleep and her shift ended, she'd walk to the train station with heavy feet. Owen always welcomed her with kindness, but she knew she couldn't stay there forever. Her old life still cast long shadows, memories of harsh words, lost dreams, and the night she had been locked out of her own apartment with nowhere to go. One rainy night, as she stared out of the Wyndham kitchen window drying dishes, Mrs. Douglas approached her with a towel. "Why are you here?" she asked, not rudely but honestly. "You don't look like someone who needs this kind of job." Callie gave a soft smile. "Because I've lost everything else," she answered. "But I haven't lost the part of me that wants to care for someone." Mrs. Douglas studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Well, let's hope this house doesn't lose you too." The next day, Leo hid Callie's shoes in the freezer. Lena painted the dog purple, and when Callie found them, she didn't scold. She sat down beside them and asked, "Was today hard for you?" The twins were quiet for a moment. Then Leah whispered, "Sometimes we think if we act crazy, people will leave faster. It's easier that way." Callie didn't answer right away. She just nodded. "I used to think that too," she said. "But sometimes staying is braver than leaving." From that moment, something changed in the air. The twins still had their wild moments, and Callie still found peanut butter in strange places. But a quiet trust began to grow between them. A fragile bond, not built on force, but on understanding. Callie didn't try to be a hero. She didn't wear a cape or carry a magic wand. But with soft steps, patient eyes, and a heart full of quiet strength, she began to do something no one else had managed. She made the Wyndham house feel like a home. The weeks passed quickly at the Wyndham estate. Callie's calm voice became part of the daily rhythm, like the sound of the ticking clock in the hallway or the soft clink of spoons against cereal bowls each morning. The twins were still loud and full of energy, but the storms were fewer. There were fewer tantrums, fewer broken picture frames, and far more laughter. Lena had taken to braiding Callie's hair before bedtime, and Leo often asked her to stay for just one more story. Even Noah, always rushing between meetings and phone calls, found himself pausing longer at breakfast, smiling at the way Callie handled his children with such patience and care. He didn't say it out loud, but a small part of him had begun to rely on her presence. The house no longer felt like it was falling apart. It felt like something was slowly being rebuilt. But outside those warm, carefully lit rooms, Callie's life was still far from steady. Each night she took the last bus across town and returned to Owen's small apartment. His couch, though clean and offered with kindness, was no place to rebuild a broken life. Her backpack sat beside her every night like a quiet reminder. She had no home of her own, just borrowed space and borrowed peace. Her past lingered in her mind, especially at night when everything was quiet. The harsh voice of her ex, Dean, still echoed in her thoughts. He had told her she was useless, that no one would ever want her again. Her mother, Ruth, had been just as unkind. When Callie had turned to her for help, Ruth had turned her away with cold eyes, and the same words she always used. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." Callie had tried to forget those words, but they clung to her like shadows. And then one evening, those shadows came back in full force. It was late when she arrived back at the apartment building. The lights in the hallway flickered and the air smelled like dust and damp carpet. As she walked up the stairs, her heart sank. Her things, what little she had, were sitting outside the apartment door in 2 black trash bags. A piece of paper was taped to the door. "Can't stay here anymore, it's not working." It wasn't even signed. Owen hadn't waited for her to come home. She didn't knock. She just stood there staring at the bags, the message, and the shut door. Her chest felt tight. She picked up the bags slowly, walked down the stairs without a word, and stepped into the street. The night air was cold and the city felt like it was swallowing her whole. She sat on a bench near the bus stop, her hands wrapped around the straps of her bag. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dean. Just 3 words. "You always fail." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there in silence, completely hollow. Morning came too early. She washed her face in a public restroom, smoothed down her coat, and forced a smile. Then she walked back into the Wyndham estate like nothing had happened. No one noticed the shadows under her eyes at first. She made breakfast, helped the twins pack for school, and even fixed Lena's favorite bracelet with a tiny piece of wire. But something about her felt dimmer, a little slower, a little more fragile. Noah noticed. Later that evening, after the twins had gone to bed, he found Callie in the kitchen staring into a cup of cold tea. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat across from her and waited. Finally, she spoke. "I have nowhere to go tonight," she whispered, "and I'm so tired of pretending I do." Noah's heart tightened. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He reached for his keys and jacket. "Come with me," he said gently. An hour later, they stood outside a quiet brick building not far from the estate. It was the home of a friend of Noah's, a retired teacher who kept extra rooms just for people in need. No questions asked. Callie was offered a clean bed, a warm meal, and a moment to breathe. But it wasn't just Noah who noticed her absence. The next day, when Callie didn't arrive as early as usual, the twins grew restless. They searched every room, asking where she was. When she finally returned that afternoon, Lena ran straight into her arms. "Don't leave again," she said, burying her face in Callie's coat. Leo didn't say anything, but he sat beside her all through dinner, quietly holding her hand under the table. That night, Callie lay in her borrowed room, staring at the ceiling. The kindness of Noah, the love from the twins, and the quiet safety of this new place. It all felt so far from where she had come from. But she also knew it wouldn't last if she didn't believe she deserved it. Her past still clung to her, threatening to drag her down. But something inside her was beginning to shift. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Callie woke to the sound of birds singing outside the small window of her borrowed room. The light was soft and golden, and for a moment, she simply lay there, listening. It had been a long time since she'd woken up without feeling the weight of fear or dread. That morning felt different, peaceful, real. She sat up slowly, stretched, and looked around at the simple, clean space. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, at least for now, and in her heart something quiet had started to grow. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, she was finally safe. At the Wyndham estate, things were changing too. The house that once echoed with yelling and crashing toys now hummed with a gentler energy. Breakfast time had turned into a shared moment of laughter and pancakes shaped like stars. Lena insisted on setting the table with pink napkins and little flower drawings. Leo liked helping Darla in the kitchen, proudly cracking eggs and stirring batter like a chef in training. Callie stood at the center of it all, guiding, listening, and smiling. She wasn't just keeping order, she was building something deeper, something that looked a lot like love. Noah had noticed the difference. His days were still packed with meetings and deadlines, but his mind didn't race the way it used to. He no longer dreaded coming home. In fact, some evenings he found himself cutting meetings short just to be back for story time or to hear the twins' excited voices describing their day. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but Callie had become a part of the family. And he wasn't the only one who felt it. One quiet afternoon, as Callie helped Lena with her spelling homework, Noah stepped into the room and cleared his throat. The twins looked up, expecting a question about chores or dinner. Instead, he said, "Callie, would you ever consider staying here? I mean, really staying? Living with us?" Callie blinked, caught off guard. Her hands paused mid-motion, and for a second no one spoke. "You mean, as a live-in nanny?" she asked softly. "No," Noah replied. "As someone who belongs here. Someone who makes this place feel like home." Lena and Leo looked at her with hopeful eyes. "Please say yes," Leo whispered. "You're our favorite person." Callie felt her heart tighten. She had spent so much of her life being pushed away, being told she wasn't enough, that she didn't matter. Now here she was, being asked to stay, not out of duty but out of love. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded slowly. "I'd like that very much," she said. The days that followed felt like chapters from a new book. The guest room upstairs was cleaned and painted a soft green. The color, Lena said, made people feel calm. Leo helped pick out a lamp shaped like a moon for her bedside table. Darla baked a cake to celebrate and claimed it was not a big deal, though the frosting spelled out "Welcome Home, Callie" in careful pink letters. Still, not everything was perfect. Callie's past wasn't easily forgotten. One evening, a letter arrived in her name. It was from Dean. Short and cruel, as always. A warning. A jab. a reminder of who she used to be. She held the letter in her hands, reading the words that once would have broken her. But now they didn't. She tore the paper in half, then again until it was just pieces in the trash. She had built something new now. She had people who cared. She had herself. One Saturday, the twins pulled off a surprise. They had planned it all week with Darla's help and sworn each other to secrecy. When Callie walked into the dining room, she found balloons tied to chairs, a handmade banner that read, "We love you, Miss Callie," and a tiny paper crown waiting on her seat. They had prepared her favorite tea, a small gift box of homemade, cards, and a photo of the three of them framed with glitter and buttons. "I've never had a day like this," Callie whispered, her voice cracking. "Get used to it," Lena said proudly. "We're your family now." Callie looked at Noah, who simply nodded with a smile. "You are loved here," he said quietly, "and nothing from your past can take that away." That night, after the twins were asleep, Callie stood by the window of her new room watching the lights of the city twinkle far away. Her heart felt full, not with worry or fear, but with a calm she had never known. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She wasn't a helper or a temporary fix. She was home. The Wyndham estate no longer felt like a grand, cold mansion. It had become a place of healing, of laughter, of second chances. And in the warmth of its walls, Callie found something she never thought she'd have again, a future worth looking forward to. She knew there would still be challenges ahead. Life was never easy, but for the first time in years, she wasn't facing them alone. And that made all the difference.